Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the big interview. Today I'm joined by Oli Christie, and he's the CEO of Neon Play. Welcome to Punchline Talks, Oli.
Hi, Mark. Good to see you.
Well, can you tell us all about Neon Play, please? It's a company that's been around for quite some time, and I know that you're the founder. Tell us a little bit about it, please.
So we started in 2010, and I had a career in advertising and digital advertising before that. And when I saw there was an opportunity, and maybe later on we can talk about how the idea came along, I thought it was time to start my own company, my first company. And I needed to find someone to program games for me because I'm non-techie, but I had a book of ideas. And I met a guy through a job ad I put online saying, opportunity of a lifetime, developer needed. And I got about 200 CVs from abroad looking for visas, but I just didn't know about that. And I just wanted to hire someone who was based locally. And I got one CV from a guy called Mark, who'd just been in America for 5 years, was coming back to the UK. And he believed in mobile, even though he was working for an Xbox and PlayStation console studio. And he lived down the road in Chipping Camden, just extraordinary. And I live near North Leach. And we met in the pub in Stowe in the World, discussed our belief that mobile gaming could be a big new thing. And in 2010, it was very, very early days of the iPhone. So it wasn't the mega thing we know it is today. And he agreed to join me. He was going to get a job for 140 grand at a big company in Cambridge. And I offered him 40 grand, which was all of my life savings. So I sort of prayed that could go well. And he agreed to join, which was fantastic, that we both believed in it. And then my book of ideas, we looked at it, we think, right, what can we do? And we thought with the World Cup was coming up, so let's do a football game. And we did a game called Flick Football, which is sort of bend it like Beckham, where you swipe with your finger. And the game launched, and we got above Angry Birds with our first game. It was ridiculous. We didn't know what we were doing. We'd never made a mobile game before, but we got a bit lucky. Nice little idea, fun to play. And then the game kicked off from there.
I love the way it kicked off from there. How did you how do you go about just even starting a game like that?
Well, you need an idea first. And literally my idea, I would get my phone and I would trace around it with a biro, draw a rectangle in the middle, and then I would just doodle an idea. So I had about 100 ideas in my book of ideas. You need various things. You need a 3D artist to create the football pitch and the stadium. We need an animator to do the goalkeeper trying to save the ball and the striker kicking the ball and the wall jumping to try and stop it. We needed an audio guy to do the voiceover, the sort of John Motson-esque, what a goal! And then we also had another audio guy doing all the ambient background sounds. So that's just the visual and audio stuff. And then we had Mark, who was the programmer, who actually then programmed the game itself. So when you swiped, it just felt nice. And that touch and feel can make such a difference to that sort of game, so that you really feel that where you're swiping goes to that top right-hand corner. And then we just iterated until it felt nice. We just did what's called the UI, the sort of user interface, the journey from homepage to menu choice to game over to options page. And it takes a bit of time. You know, people say, how long does it take to make a game? Generally between 2 months to 4 months. But it can depend if it's a small game, which might take a month, or a big game might take 6 months.
It's one of my favorite games, by the way. I've still got it on my phone and I still play it. I've only got three games. One of them is Doodle, and that one is the one I play the most, actually, because it doesn't matter how tired you feel, you can still have a game. I mean, how many downloads did you have? And sorry, you said about how much money did you make from it, and how did you market it? How did you get it off the ground?
Well, that's a good question. And actually, marketing iPhone games these days is so much harder and more expensive than it was in 2010. So we actually did a deal with a company called Miniclip, who were a big flash games company who were just seeing the potential in mobile. So we did a deal with them, and they then promoted it through on their websites and on their mobile games. So that cost us a bit in shared revenue. These days, we are spending hundreds of thousands of pounds a month advertising our games. In 2010, we spent virtually nothing. And so today, launching the company, you would need 2 to 5 million to launch a mobile games company, just to have the funds to be able to compete in this competitive market. Because we're paying essentially between 50 cents and $2 or $3 to get one download these days. So we're then having a free download, that is, not a paid download, a free download. And we're then having to try and monetize users to make that money back, plus to make a profit. So it's hyper competitive. and a very mature data-led market these days compared to what it was when we started, when it was literally just launch a game. We barely knew how many downloads we got. It was very, very basic. It was more about chart position. So the data is now king, but it can make wise decisions, so you're not wasting your time going down a rabbit hole of death.
So when you after you launched that and it became successful, what did you do next? And did you have a whole load of other games backed up and think, all right, I've got some money now, I can invest?
Yeah, we did. Because I funded the Neon Play with my own money, literally 40 grand of my own money, and that was hoping that we get some money to be able to play Mark. So we then grew organically. We hired another programmer, another artist, Matt and Glenn, and we were in a little tiny above a shop in Cirencester, and we grew to about 9 people, and we did games called Paper Glider, and that happened to become Apple's 10 billionth game download. There was a massive countdown on apple.com going down to 10 billion on the App Store on their homepage. And one night I got a call from Apple. Well, in fact, I was putting my daughter to bed and I got a missed call from Cupertino, which is Apple's headquarters. I'm like, bloody hell, what's going on there? And I called them back, and this lady went, "Hi, Ashan, I'm calling from Apple." I'm like, "Apple are actually calling you up?" We were 10 months old as a company. They never called you. We've been desperately trying to get them to feature our games. And she said, "You might have seen that we've been doing this 10 billion app countdown." I was going, "Yeah, we were talking about it at the pub today, actually," which we had been. And the winning person who got the 10 billionth download actually earned 10 grand for downloading that game. And I thought I'd won 10 grand for downloading a game. But it was even better that our game, Paper Glider, had become the 10 billionth app download, which was nuts. We happened to be number one in America that day because we'd launched a game at that time. But it was amazing. And we were on This Morning with Eamon Holmes. We were on newspapers all over the world, literally sort of front page of the San Francisco Herald and stuff like that. So it was incredible being a 10-month-old company, being really put on the map. So we just grew organically, and we always have, really. And we're still here, which is not easy for a games company in this competitive market.
So what happened after that? So then Paper Glider, then what? Then what?
We launched games called Traffic Panic. The market then got quite tough. It went from being paid games, 59p for a download, to free games. And we were really perplexed by this pay to free and having to monetize through advertising and in-app purchase. And to be honest, we didn't do very well. And we did struggle for a bit in the mid 2010s. And then a few things happened. And then we actually sold a majority of our company in 2016 to a company called Hachette, who are the second biggest book publisher in this country. And they've been brilliant. They've been a brilliant parent company. They've given us the financial backing and the HR and the legal and the finance, the sort of the boring stuff, so to speak. But they've let us, as an independent game studio, essentially just get on and make the games we want to make. We're now specializing in 2 areas. One is hyper casual games, which to you and me are very, very simple, fun games that can be played by a 5-year-old boy or an 80-year-old granny or anyone in between. And we've had a few good games. We've had a game called Buka, where you've got to pot a puck in a hole, which is really good fun, Buca. And our biggest hit was a game called Roller Splat, which we made during what's called a hackathon. So every 3 months, we'll down tools. The whole company will stop working. And for 1 or 2 days, you have a carte blanche to make any game you want. And we had a guy on work experience from the University of Gloucestershire called Tom. And his hackathon game was this little game called Roller Splat, where you had a paint roller and you had to try and just cover a maze in paint. Very, very simple. He made 6 levels. We tested it and he got some really good data. We then changed it to a paint ball rather than a paint roller, made it faster, made it look prettier, nicer special effects and stuff. And we worked with a company called Voodoo, who helped to publish it and advertise it. And it was the #1 game all over the world for about a month. We were above Facebook, Google, YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram in downloads for about a month. It was insane. All from a guy on work experience making a little game in a day.
Wow. So did he make some serious money out of that then, or is it because it's free downloads, or is it from advertising?
Did we? Yeah, it was a great year. It was. I mean, we didn't make gazillions, but it was a really good year, and there's legacy income that can come from that sort of game. So we do hyper casual games, and then we also do a thing called idle tycoon games, which is more in-depth games that you take time as a player to invest and try and build up. So our best one has been Idle Army Base. There's one recently called Idle Golf Tycoon, where you've got to create your own golf course, upgrade your clubhouse, open more holes, get more groundsmen, get golf pros, do tournaments. And so those, if people want to have a look at those two games, those have been quite fun for us and successful.
So what's happening next then? What's going to be the next big thing in the marketplace? Because I'm assuming that's where you want to be.
Yeah, well, it's tricky, and it's a very fast-moving market, and trends come and go. Monetization methods change, but we're sticking to those two genres at the moment. We've had some good success. We know what we're doing there, and we're hopefully improving a little bit as we go along. But it's very hard, and to be honest, most of the stuff that we make never sees the light of day. We're a bit like an iceberg, whereby what you see is that above the ice, but actually underneath the water, there's dozens and dozens of prototypes that we test, and we soft launch in America just with $50 a day in America on Facebook. But if the data says the game's got no chance, we just put it in the bin and move on. So it's changed a lot in that respect. Whereas previously we would make a game and launch it and just hope it did well. Now we use the data to verify whether it's got good marketing potential, i.e. the marketing costs will be low to acquire new users, and also the revenue is potentially high because players are retaining, they're actually staying around and playing for 1 day, 3 day, a week, 2 weeks.
So you started off in marketing, you said. So how did you get into that? So where are you from originally? Are you from Gloucestershire originally?
No, I was born in London. That's where my parents lived in the 70s. And then we moved to Buckinghamshire, Boring Bucks, as we called it, because my dad's family business was there. Dad used to work in advertising back in the day at JWT. And then, but a lot of our family mates were actually in Gloucestershire and Wiltshire, so we would come here quite a lot. And my godparents were here. So I always thought this was a place I'd love to live. Even as a teenager, it's weird. And then I did my time in London, working for advertising agencies. And I met my wife, who was based down in Gloucestershire. And so that worked quite well that I wanted to live in Gloucestershire as well. And so we ended up, I moved full time down here.
A bit of a, punt going from a bit like me being a chef going into advertising. There's a bit of a punt going from advertising to making your own games. Well, is it something that you've always wanted to do?
No, it's funny. I'm not really a gamer. I don't own a PlayStation or an Xbox, but I love ideas. And my passion really was advertising. And I was a copywriter originally. I was writing ads for Coca-Cola, Kit Kat, Hula Hoops, Carlsberg, Motorola. I've worked for about 200 or 300 brands over my career. And I love that. My favorite thing, we were doing an on-pack promotion for Kit Kat. Okay, so you've got a Kit Kat and you have a little promotion at the top of the thing. And we did a deal with The Simpsons for The Simpsons 25th anniversary, I think it was, or 20th anniversary. And you could win tickets to Hollywood, to Universal Studios or whatever it might be. And the headline that we'd written and I was a junior copywriter, I'd been doing this for like weeks sort of thing, was win tickets to Hollywood to meet The Simpsons. It was something really plonky and boring. And we were having a meeting and the creative director said, here we go, here's our final artwork. And I plucked up the courage to say, isn't that headline a bit boring? Bearing in mind, I was a copywriter, even a junior one. And went, all right, then do a better one. And I went, hang out with Homer in Hollywood. And he went, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And my little line, which I thought of in 5 seconds, went on about 100 million Kit Kats. And it was like a real buzz as a young copywriter to suddenly have your name. So every newsagent you went into, you would just see your little headline there. It was quite fun.
I know exactly where you're coming from. I've had product going into people's houses. I walked into people's kitchens, and there's my design of a brand that I helped put together. And it really is exciting. As a marketeer, that's what you want, isn't it?
It's a real buzz. And I remember we were working for Coca-Cola, and they decided at the last minute to take a page in the Millennium Dome brochure. So remember the big deal that Millennium Dome was in 99, 2000. And one night they said, right, Coca got an ad in the Millennium Dome, and you've got until tomorrow morning to write it, the ad, and design it. We didn't have an art director on it. And this was like at 5 p.m. So I went home and I was like, Jesus, what am I going to do? This is, a big deal. Coca-Cola, biggest brand in the world. Millennium Dome, biggest thing in the UK at the time. Anyway, so I had this idea that you had a Coca-Cola bottle shape, which is obviously so iconic. And I wrote text which would fit within the Coke bottle, but had that sort of hourglass thing. And I wrote 5 different copy scripts for it within that shape of the bottle. And they approved one of them, which was very evocative about the feeling you had when you drank Coca-Cola. And it went in, and I went to the Millennium Dome, and there it was, my Coke ad. It was a real buzz.
it's just, I know exactly where you're coming from. Absolutely fantastic. So you moved from there then to set up Neon Play with this 40,000 quid. Did you save up the 40,000 and go, right, okay, this is what I'm going to do now? A bit of a stroke of luck then finding Mark.
That was a massive stroke of luck. I think it was an interesting little quick short story how it came about. So when I'd started in digital marketing during the dot-com boom in the early noughties, we were doing websites for brands. We were doing banner advertising, which was endless, the dot-com boom, that's all people did really, and email marketing, all this digital stuff. And at the time, people were emailing around flash games viral flash games that people would just play. And they were just little silly games, not for brands really. And I remember talking to the managing director saying, we should do games for our clients, and then you could promote and advertise a promotion or a competition, whatever you're trying to advertise. But we thought we'd better actually make our own flash game first, just to work out how the hell to make a game. And at the time, I think it was 2001, there was a general election about to happen. So we said, well, let's do a game about the election. So we brainstormed elections and what happens. And we said, well, people sometimes chuck eggs at MPs, don't they, during elections? So we made this game called Splat the MP, where it was just a 2D game, a little sort of Thatcher would pop up and you'd chuck an egg at her and it would just splat on her face. And the game was literally about to launch the next day. And that day, John Prescott punched that protester. Do you remember when he punched the protester who cracked an egg on his head? So the next morning I got it, said, right, we've got to put Prescott in. So when John Prescott came in, you splattered the egg and then this massive fist would suddenly just hit the screen. So simple, just crappy little cartoons. It was nothing snazzy at all. And we launched it. And within minutes, it went viral. In those days, we had a little clicker along the bottom of the page, just showing how many plays it had. And that evening, we were on the BBC News, we were on the Channel 4 News, we were getting interviews in Australia and Germany, just because of this rubbish little flash game. But it really put us on the map. And suddenly, clients were coming to us saying, oh, can you make a game for our we did games for lastminute.com, for Tesco, and the BBC. And I did a game for the BBC, for BBC Training. Do you remember those John Cleese, Ronnie Corbett videos we used to watch at school?
Yeah, loved them.
They've got all this talent, and they use the talent to make training videos for businesses. So quite dry. And so we came up with a game idea whereby training's really boring. So you would scrumple up your piece of paper and chuck it in the bin. So we did this very simple flash game for the BBC in 2001 or 2, where you just chuck paper in the bin and the fan would blow the paper into the bin. Anyway, 15, whatever it was, years later, 10 years later, when the iPhone came out, a studio in Australia copied this game pixel for pixel and put it on the iPhone pretty much. And it was making £500,000 a month, this game. I read an article about it. And I was like, we charged the BBC 10 grand for that game, and this company's now making £500,000 a month off basically my idea. And I thought, right, it's time to leave. I was a senior guy in this advertising agency in Swindon, but it was time to start my own company. And I'd never made a mobile game. I didn't know what you had to do to make a mobile game. And I put and then the story about finding Mark. So it's funny how these things come about, but often you need that motivation to kick you to that final step to starting your own company. And that was it for me.
What did you see in Mark that was, so different to everybody else? I mean, yes, you managed to persuade him not to go for 170,000, maybe a bit gullible, not to go for 170,000 job, but go for 40,000. Obviously, equity. Did you just hit it off with him? Was that it?
Yeah, we just got on very well from the moment go, and we still work together every day today. So it's been a brilliant partnership. I think he believed in mobile. He'd been trying to convince his company in America to do mobile, but they were trying to put it in a profit center, had the same overheads of these massive games. So it was never going to work as a test bed. And I believed in mobile because I could see the direction of travel. Doodle Jump had just come out, Angry Birds had just come out. People were just getting so excited about this touchscreen thing, which was just such a change from the Blackberries and Nokias we've been used to. And it was a massive punt. It was a real punt. But, we managed to convince him to do it, and we got lucky. Now,
I know that you like to work with university students and things like this, and that Tom that you spoke about earlier. Is there still a chance that these young guys can come in and do it? Has it never been so easy, or is it just a crowded market and just be as difficult as hell?
I mean, I think it's the most competitive marketplace in the entire world. I don't know any business where two guys in their bedroom or one guy in his bedroom can make a game that can compete on the same app store as EA Games or Epic or Riot. And that's the reality. And these hyper-casual games, these very, very simple games, like the one Roller Splat I talked about, these can be made by bedroom developers. Now, what they don't have is the access to millions of dollars of advertising revenue, but there are publishers like Voodoo, and we publish games as well, whereby people can take a game, test it with $200 of revenue, see if it's got some good retention and data numbers, and then launch it. Now, it may not scale massively, it may peter out very quickly, but until you scale it, you don't know. So yes, students can do it. And that's why we've always been great fans of giving students work experience with a view to finding future star employees. But also, I remember when I was trying to get into advertising in the late 80s and early 90s, I would write all these letters to ad agencies in London and Oxford, wherever. And they'd all say, sorry, Mr. Christie, but you've got no experience. I was going, I know I've got no experience because I can't get any damn experience. And I always vouched that I would try and help younger people because it's the hardest thing is that first rung on the ladder in any career, isn't it? And so we've tried to do that. Now, the sad thing is since COVID, it's got harder. Obviously, through COVID, you couldn't do it at all. But even now, because so many people are home working, we don't have this thriving studio where people can just walk around and ask different people questions and just sit at their desk for an hour. So I think that is a worry for the future of work experience and apprenticeships is just the lack of people in the workplace.
And also, I mean, the cost of staff nowadays, isn't it? And trying to find decent people. Are you finding it the same?
Yeah, there's been this, excuse me, this thing called the Great Resignation. And we've lost a few people earlier on this year, which was really, really tough. But they all just got offered, very, very high salaries to leave, which we just didn't feel justified in paying them. And we want to pay people what we think is the right salary. Of course we do, and we do, but we don't take the piss salaries, if you know what I mean. Excuse my language. But yeah, it's a real issue. But hopefully courses know the skills that are required, and we've worked with the University of Gloucestershire course to try and let them know the software and the skills that are required in the real world market. Because I think 10 years ago, they weren't prepared for what was actually happening in the real world. And I've been trying to speak to Stephen at the university about courses partnering in any course. This is not just games, partnering with real world companies for work experience, for shaping their course, the skills that are required, the softwares that are required, whatever's happening in the real world, because everything changes so quickly, and in 1 year you can get left behind.
Yeah, it's not just obviously gaming; it's engineering, it's robotics, it's every single thing really. I'm the same as you. We try to help with loads of young kids, but I can't do it now. We work from home, and that's the problem with working from home, isn't it? You just can't see how the young people are going to get that work experience.
No, and we've talked in the past about assimilating knowledge when in our first jobs. I remember being an ad agency, just be completely open-eyed and open-eared to what was going on and just hearing these conversations happening. Now in the 90s in advertising, it was quite fruity, the language, and but it was just really interesting to see the way people interacted, seeing how different cultures work, how different management styles. And if you're in your first job and you've been told to work at home on Zoom, you'll be there for the 1 hour calls. But then for 5 hours a day, you won't be, and you won't be learning or listening to anything. You're just doing your work, and that's a real, real concern. And I hope this balance of home working comes back a little bit, so that we are more on the office going forward.
I hope so. I really do. What would you say? You obviously run a very successful company. Is it 25 staff, turnover of £6 or £7 million? What's the biggest lesson you've learned, Oli, in this journey?
The biggest lesson, you've got to keep up with the trends. For us, when it went from paid to free, we didn't get on it quick enough, to be honest, and it was a very tough time as a result. And I think you just can't, and we were aware of this stuff, and you go to conferences and there are all these advertising companies saying you should advertise in your game, and we're like, no, we're fine, but we weren't really, to be honest. So have reality checks, maybe have someone on the outside really critiquing what you're doing. And I think having, and I had 2 or 3 mentors who, when I started, there were people who gave me advice and were someone to bounce off when things got quite hairy, which they did in the early days. And I think that's a good thing to have, is just to have outside people, and you don't have to pay them. I would give them a case of wine a year as a thank you, just to sort of give you a reality check and to seriously question, are you doing the right thing? Are you moving with the times? So that's one thought.
Now, moving with the times, I saw a lovely photograph of you the other day, shaking hands with the Queen. Where was that, and why were you introduced to her?
That was at Buckingham Palace in 2013. So when we started the company, we were very keen to try and promote what we were doing and win awards for morale, for PR, and for a bit of whatever, feeling good. We had a good story to tell at that stage. So we entered Cirencester Business Awards. We won those. We entered Gloucestershire Business Awards. We were lucky enough to win those. Those are good nights at the Centaur. And as we were sort of getting confident with winning awards, we thought, let's enter the Queen's Award for Enterprise, which is the biggest business award really in the UK. And then one day I got a letter in the post, and it was postmarked Buckingham Palace in red. I was like, and it was like a really stiff envelope. I was like, wow. Opened it up, and we'd won a Queen's Award, and we'd been invited to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen. So Mark and I went up to London. We had lunch at the Ritz, because it's not often you meet the Queen. Went through security, went into the middle of Buckingham Palace to that parking area, went through all the soldiers with their amazing polished uniforms, up the red stairs into this incredible picture gallery, which if you look at online, it's this amazing room. And then we were asked to come through to meet the Queen, and you went around the corner, and there she was. And it's just like, it's the Queen. You just can't believe it's the Queen. It was the hottest day in London. You wouldn't believe it. And so we were all a bit sweaty. She didn't have a bead of sweat on her, literally. She was wearing her white gloves. And I was sort of trying to sort of dry my hands before I met her. And you get there, your name is read out by the sort of footman on your invitation card. And you look at her in the eye, shake her hand, bow.
She's quite short, mind you. You've got to kind of look down.
She's very short, but it was just the most amazing thing. And you get sort of 10 seconds, whatever it was, in her presence, but you just feel so blessed and honoured. And I've never forgotten it to this day. And obviously, she died recently, which was an absolute tragedy. It was an event we knew would happen, but didn't believe would, because she just seemed immortal. She's always been a presence in our lives. But I think King Charles will do a brilliant job. He'll be a hard act to follow. The Queen will be a hard act to follow, but I think he'll be great.
I totally agree there. Totally agree with you. Okay, we're kind of running out of time already, would you believe? But I could quickly ask you, if I went in your car and turned on the CD player, you probably haven't got a CD player, but what's the latest track that you've actually bought? CD or record or album, or what's the latest music that you bought or downloaded?
My favourite album is Wolf Alice Blue Weekend at the moment. And if it was a CD, I would have worn it out. It's on my iPhone, so it's not, but it's just fantastic.
Alice, what's that?
The band's called Wolf Alice, and the album's called Blue Weekend, and it is absolutely amazing.
All right, I'll look at that. Okay.
I'd love to see them in concert.
Top 3 business tips, sir. What are they?
Top 3 business tips. One is hiring, and we have a policy that a maybe is a no. And it's really, really hard to hire good people these days. And I think in the past we have hired people we thought, yeah, they're okay, because we were desperate to hire that position. But it's often a false economy to hire somebody who is a maybe, because generally your hunch is right, and the maybe probably comes a bit rubbish often. So it's worth spending that extra time, weeks, maybe months if necessary, just to find that right person, because it will pay dividends going forward than hiring Mr. or Mrs. Average.
Fantastic. Second one?
That second one is test early. Now we make games, but whether you're making a product or a service, create it and test it early, because it's better to iterate than what we call an MVP, minimum viable product. Just get something out there, get it in people's hands, get some people's feedback. Use data where you can these days. Data can be such a powerful tool. So if you've got access to data, use it and get an analyst to just try and pull out the relevant data, and then iterate, bin it if you need to. If you look at Dyson, he didn't make the perfect Hoover. He did 200-300 iterations of that product. So whatever you're doing, just iterate quickly and test. Don't be too precious and wait till it's this absolutely final product, because otherwise you'll never launch it out. So that's what I would do.
Okay, fantastic. And the last one, sir.
The last one is more of a business ethos, which we always use, which is be fair and reasonable. And any business decision we make, we want to be fair and reasonable. So if someone's asking for a salary rise, is it right that they ask for this? I mentioned earlier on that people are getting these big pay hikes from competitors, and they just weren't worth it, I'm afraid. If we're doing a business deal, is it feel fair and reasonable? You both want to feel in a deal that you're not unhappy or you're too over happy. If you feel you've really screwed them to the ground, they're probably thinking, I've been a bit done by here. And therefore your long-term business relationship probably isn't going to work. So I think it's a really good business ethos. You know, I'm not an absolute shyster shark who wants to beat and smash everyone. That's not me personally. But I think it's a really nice way to live your life by.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because sometimes you do get people trying to screw you for absolutely everything, and you walk away thinking, that wasn't the world's greatest deal. Not a great way sometimes to run a relationship.
And what goes around comes around. The world's a very small place now with social media and with LinkedIn, and you know, employees who leave you in the lurch or behave terribly, it generally comes back to bite them on the backside, because it's such a small world, and with references, you don't even need references. You can just ping someone on LinkedIn saying, well, hiring this guy, what was he like? And so I think you've got to be a little bit careful these days than maybe you did in the 80s and 90s.
I was going to say, Gloucestershire is a small place to do business. Everyone knows everyone, Ollie.
But it's why you've got to treat people properly, you know, because it'll come back to haunt you.
Certainly. Oli Christie from Neon Play, thanks ever so much for joining Punchline Talks today. Always great to catch up with you. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Mark.
And if you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe.